What kind of manager makes a waitress cry during a lunch rush? It was the third complaint in 2 weeks about Store 6, a small diner-style restaurant tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat on the edge of town. Viktor Kline, the owner of the 10-location restaurant chain, stared at the message on his tablet, jaw tight. He'd built the business from a single food truck 10 years ago. Back then, he cooked every burger himself, handed out free meals to struggling families, and knew every staff member by name. Now, with expansion came layers: district managers, store managers, training leads. And somewhere along the way, things started slipping through. He didn't know the staff at Store 6 personally. It was a newer location, opened during the pandemic. The hiring had been done by a district manager, and Viktor had only seen it once during construction. Still, he had a gut feeling something was off. The reviews weren't just about slow service or mixed-up orders. They were about people: rude staff, cold managers, rushed servers. He rubbed his forehead and stood up slowly from his desk. "I'm done reading about it," he said to no one. "I'm gonna see it myself." He didn't tell anyone his plan. He emailed the district manager, pretending to be an old friend of a potential hire, asked if he could drop in and shadow for a day or two. He gave a fake name, Jim. His disguise was solid: scruffy gray beard, thick reading glasses, worn baseball cap, and a second-hand flannel shirt. He looked nothing like the clean-cut CEO from the corporate videos. Besides, most of the staff had probably never seen him in person. By Monday morning, he was stepping through the back door of Store 6. Inside, the kitchen was loud, pans clanged, timers buzzed, someone shouted about running low on fries. A tall man in a black polo, clearly the manager, glanced at Viktor with mild disinterest. "You the new guy?" he asked. "Yeah, Jim, just here to learn." "Not looking for anything fancy." The manager nodded. "Whatever, don't get in the way." No handshake, no welcome. Viktor just nodded and followed a cook to the prep area. For the next hour, he chopped lettuce, restocked napkins, and wiped down trays. At noon, the lunch crowd hit. That's when he noticed her. A young waitress, maybe in her mid-20s, with tired eyes but a bright smile. Her name tag read Elsie. She moved like she had the whole floor memorized, dodging trays, greeting regulars, refilling waters before they were half empty. And even when a customer snapped at her for forgetting ranch, she apologized with grace. Viktor watched her juggle 6 tables without flinching. But when she stepped behind the counter to enter an order, the manager stormed over. "You're behind again," he hissed, low but sharp. "Table 4's been waiting 9 minutes. You think that's acceptable?" "I'm doing my best, Greg," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your best isn't cutting it." Viktor caught the flicker of hurt in her eyes before she turned away. She didn't argue, just kept working. Later that afternoon, Viktor stepped out onto the floor, holding a tray with a single coffee cup. His shift was technically over, but he wanted to see the front from a customer's view. He sat at a corner booth, back to the kitchen, hat pulled low. A few minutes passed before Elsie approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Hey there," she said with a warm but tired smile. "You doing okay?" "Yeah," Viktor said, voice lowered. "Just tacking a break," she nodded. "Want anything else? We've got pie today, blueberry and apple." "No thanks." "Just the coffee's good." She hovered for a second, then slid into the booth across from him. "I'm not supposed to sit," she said, glancing back. "But my feet are killing me." Viktor chuckled. "You've earned it. You've been running around all day." She smiled, then looked at him more closely. "You new? Haven't seen you before." "Yeah, just started today. Name's Jim." She offered her hand. "Elsie," they shook. "So what brought you here?" she asked. "Needed a change. Used to run my own place, wanted to see how other folks do it." She leaned back and sighed. "Well, this one's a mixed bag." "How so?" Her lips tightened, like she wasn't sure if it was safe to speak. Then she shrugged. "You didn't hear it from me, but Greg's not exactly a people person. He's smart, I'll give him that. Knows how to run a tight ship. But he doesn't care about his staff much." Viktor nodded slowly. "I noticed he's direct." "He's a jerk," she said flatly. Then her face turned red. "Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I'm just tired. Been here almost a year. I love the customers, but it's hard when your manager treats you like you're disposable." "You ever think about leaving?" "Every week," she admitted. "But jobs are hard to come by, and I need the tips to help my mom with bills. She's got some health stuff." He watched her, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her apron. There was no bitterness in her tone, just exhaustion, and still she smiled at every table. Still, she sat with a stranger who looked lonely. "I'll tell you what, Elsie," he said. "You deserve better," she let out a laugh. "If only you were the boss." Viktor smiled under his beard. "Yeah, if only." Just then, Greg walked past and shot them a glare. "Elsie, breaks over, you're on again." She shot up from the booth. "Sorry." "Gotta go." Viktor watched her disappear into the chaos, and something in his gut twisted. He didn't come here expecting to feel something personal. But now it was more than a bad review or a poor manager. He'd seen someone trying, someone good, stuck in a place that didn't value her. And he wasn't going to ignore that. The next day started colder. Not outside, the weather was mild, but inside the restaurant. There was no hello from the manager, no acknowledgement that Viktor had shown up again. He clocked in quietly, same flannel shirt, same baseball cap, and was handed a rag and a bottle of cleaner without a word. Greg didn't bother looking up from the clipboard he was scribbling on. By 9:30, customers began trickling in. The early crowd was mostly retirees and a few postal workers grabbing breakfast during their route. Viktor was placed on light restock again: napkins, condiments, coffee filters. He kept his ears open. The line cook, a wiry guy named Mason, was muttering to himself as he flipped eggs. "How many times I gotta say we're down to one burner," he said, not to anyone in particular. Greg walked past and caught the last part. "Then work faster on the ones that do work," he said without slowing down. Mason didn't respond. He just rolled his eyes and kept plating. Viktor slipped over near the prep station where the server station backed up against the kitchen. He saw Elsie again, hair pulled back tighter today, sleeves rolled up, moving trays with both hands. She didn't look up as she passed, but she paused briefly when she reached the register. "Hey," she said quietly, "you made it back." Viktor nodded. "Figured I'd see if I could keep up." "You're lucky. You're behind the scenes. Try juggling 2 birthdays, a food allergy, and a two-top who thinks I'm their personal butler." He raised an eyebrow. "That bad?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just Tuesday." A customer waved at her from booth 3 and she was gone again. Viktor moved toward the back where the walk-in cooler sat. He figured it was a good place to get a few minutes out of sight. Inside, the air hit sharp nothing but boxes of frozen fries, bags of shredded cheese, and a torn crate of lettuce. But what caught his attention wasn't the food. It was the clipboard hanging by the door. Inventory logs. He scanned the top sheet. Half the boxes listed were marked as low or out. Fry oil had been crossed out with a note, "Pending delivery since last Thursday." Another line read, "Bacon reordered again." He flipped the page, no signature, no initials, just a trail of unchecked boxes and vague notes. When he stepped back out, he noticed Greg near the back sink, chewing on something and talking on his phone. If corporate calls, tell them the order's in. Doesn't matter if it isn't, they just want to hear it's coming. Viktor ducked behind the shelf of cleaning supplies, out of view. The call ended fast. Greg tossed some wrappers in the trash, wiped his hands on his pants, and walked off. At around 11:15, the pace picked up sharply. The booths filled, the kitchen heat rose, and the printer started spitting out tickets nonstop. Viktor moved to bussing tables, wiping, resetting, clearing plates, anything to stay nearby and keep watching. By 11:40, things were stretched thin. One of the servers, a younger guy named Jordan, spilled a tray of drinks near the entrance. Ice cubes scattered across the tile, and the sound of glass breaking stopped the entire front half of the restaurant. Greg appeared almost instantly. "Are you kidding me?" he barked. "Do you think we have time to babysit?" Jordan knelt, face red, picking up the broken pieces. It slipped. "I'll clean it." "You'll clean it and stay late. You're not leaving until that's off your check." Viktor stepped forward with a broom from under the counter. "I got it," he said, crouching down. Jordan looked up, surprised. "Thanks, man." Greg didn't move. He kept watching, arms folded, like he was daring Jordan to say something else. When the mess was cleared, he turned and walked off without a word. Viktor followed. He caught up to Greg in the dish area, where the manager was jotting something onto a laminated schedule. "Busy day," Viktor said casually. Greg didn't look up. "Always is. You short-staffed." "We're staffed fine. People just don't pull their weight." Viktor leaned against the wall. Seems like they're moving pretty fast to me. Greg looked over at him finally. You here to observe or give opinions? Just noticed a few folks could use a breather, that's all. Greg's tone sharpened. This isn't a retirement home. They want breaks, they can earn them. Viktor said nothing. He just nodded and walked off. At the far end of the kitchen, near the dry storage, he found Elsie again. She was refilling a tray of ketchup bottles, her hands trembling slightly as she screwed on the caps. You good? He asked. She didn't answer for a moment, then quietly, it's just hard to breathe sometimes, not literally. Just, he nodded slowly. Why not say something to him? She let out a quiet laugh. And end up off the schedule next week, no thanks. He leaned closer, voice low. You're not the only one noticing. She looked at him, unsure. You sound like someone who's watching more than working. I guess I am. Before she could say anything else, the bell at the pass-through dinged loudly. Order up. Table 5, Mason yelled. Elsie stood straight, took a breath, and disappeared around the corner. That night, Viktor stayed late on purpose, pretending to help with closing tasks. He wiped down counters that had already been wiped, swept corners twice. He wanted to see how the shift ended. By 8:45, the last customers were gone. The lights dimmed slightly and the music was turned down. The staff moved slower now, shoulders low, eyes tired. Greg stood near the register, calculating drawer totals. Tips get split yet? He asked without looking. Elsie reached into her apron and handed him a folded envelope. Here, he took it, counted quickly, and scribbled something down. You're a few bucks short. She looked confused. I counted twice, it should be right. He held up a receipt. You forgot the comped meal from earlier, still counts toward your total. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Take it from tomorrow's, we'll square it then. She nodded slowly and walked away. Viktor watched her head to the back, pull on her coat, and sit down briefly near the lockers. Her shoulders slumped and she rubbed her temples with both hands. He walked over quietly. You need a ride, she looked up, startled. Oh no, I take the bus, he checked his watch. That's a long wait. I don't mind. He sat across from her again, same way he had the day before. You ever think about trying a different store? Her eyebrows pulled together. What do you mean? Same company, different location, might be better. She shook her head. Greg handles staffing for all the nearby ones. He said it'd be a transfer through him, and he's not exactly eager to let anyone go. I see. She narrowed her eyes a little. Why do you ask so many questions? He smiled faintly. Force of habit. Used to run a place, remember? Yeah, but most people don't ask about my tips or my transfer options. Viktor leaned back. Let's just say I believe in paying attention to people who deserve more than they're getting. She studied him for a moment. You're not just some trainee, are you? He held her gaze. You'll find out soon enough. Before she could press further, Greg called out from the front. Whoever's still here, let's go. Lock up in 5. Elsie stood, pulling her bag over her shoulder. You're weird, Jim, I've been told. She gave a small nod, then turned and walked out the side door. Viktor stayed seated, watching the door swing shut behind her. He'd seen enough. The inventory issues, the pressure tactics, the intimidation, the way Greg micromanaged from a distance but never lifted a finger to help, and worst of all, how he leveraged fear like a tool. Tomorrow, Viktor wouldn't be bussing tables. He had a different plan, not a confrontation, not yet. But the days of hiding behind a flannel shirt were numbered, and Greg had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Viktor didn't dress for dish duty. He parked 2 blocks from store 6, changed clothes in the back of his car, and stepped into a pair of polished black Oxfords. His beard came off in pieces carefully clipped, then shaved clean. He wore a crisp button-down navy blazer and a silver watch that hadn't seen daylight in months. No flannel, no hat, just the man who signed the payroll checks. He didn't walk through the back door this time. At exactly 9:30, he entered through the front, the bell overhead chiming twice as he stepped into the quiet, half-assembled breakfast shift. A few customers sat near the windows, nursing coffee refills. One booth had a toddler chewing on toast while his father scrolled through his phone. Behind the counter, Elsie glanced up from a tray of syrups, paused and blinked. Her hand froze mid-reach. She tilted her head slightly, brow furrowed. Viktor gave her a small nod. She didn't wave. She didn't speak, just stood still, watching. Greg came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, mourning. Table for one. Viktor didn't answer. He walked past Greg and to the center of the dining room where the staff could all see him. My name is Viktor Kline. I own this place. Greg's expression shifted instantly. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. A few cooks poked their heads from the kitchen. Elsie stood frozen near the drink station, one hand still on the tray. I've been working here the past 2 days. You know me as Jim. Someone dropped a spoon behind the counter. I came because I'd been getting too many reports, not about slow food or missed orders, about people, about how they were being treated. Greg stepped forward quickly, voice low and urgent. Look, Mr. Kline, if there was a misunderstanding, there wasn't. The room fell completely still. Even the toddler had gone quiet. Viktor looked at the employees' faces he now recognized. Mason stood at the pass-through, arms crossed but eyes wary. Jordan leaned on a broom handle, half frozen. A dishwasher in a stained apron peeked from the back hall, every one of them silent. You've all been working under conditions that don't match the values of this company. That ends today. He turned to Greg. Office. Now. Greg hesitated, then turned stiffly and walked toward the back. Viktor followed, passing Elsie without a glance. She didn't move. Inside the cramped office, Viktor shut the door behind him. The walls were lined with outdated posters and 2 half-empty file cabinets. A desk fan buzzed in the corner. Greg stood with his arms folded, trying to steady his voice. If this is about the past couple days, I didn't know who you were. I treat everyone the same. That's the problem. I run this store tight because I have to. You want numbers. I've hit every sales target for 3 quarters. Labor costs are under control. Food waste is down. At what cost? Greg stepped closer. I've been in this business 15 years. You go soft on people, everything falls apart. They take advantage. They get lazy. Viktor didn't raise his voice. What you call discipline, I call fear. What you see as efficiency, I see as burnout. Greg scoffed. So what? They fed you a few sob stories, and now you're here to play hero. I watched you humiliate a server in front of customers. I saw you threaten to dock someone's pay over a spilled drink. You lied about inventory reports. You ignored equipment issues. You cut corners and covered it with numbers. Greg's tone sharpened. I kept this place running. You built a machine that runs on silence. Viktor stepped around the desk, picked up the clipboard with the schedule on it. You've scheduled people 6 days straight without break. No rotation. No shift balance. They don't complain. They're afraid to. Greg's voice dropped. If you replace me, you'll see what happens. This place will fall apart. No one else will put up with this chaos. Viktor looked him in the eye. They won't have to. He opened the office door. You're done here. Greg stepped forward, jaw clenched. You sure about this? Completely. Greg left without a word. Not a protest, not a glance back. Just walked out past the front counter and through the door, silence trailing behind him. Viktor returned to the dining area. The staff had gathered near the drink station, whispering in small clusters. When they saw him, the whispers stopped. He addressed them directly. Greg is no longer with the company. No one cheered. No one moved. They just watched, unsure if this was the start of something better or just another shift in control. I saw what you've all been dealing with. I can't fix everything in a day, but I can start. He turned to Elsie. You're the most capable floor lead I've seen in a long time. You know this store, you know the people, and you've earned the respect he never gave you. She blinked, lips parted slightly. I want you to step in as interim floor manager, effective immediately. Mason muttered something under his breath. Elsie turned to him, then back to Viktor. I've never run a shift. You've already been doing it. She looked down, then nodded once. Viktor turned to the rest of the crew. Until we bring in a new general manager, staffing and operations will be handled with your input. No more single-point decision-making. We'll rotate shifts properly. No more overloading the same people 6 days a week, and if something's broken, report it. No more pretending. Jordan raised his hand slightly, uncertain. What about tips? Full transparency. Starting now, tips go into a locked box counted with 2 people present. You'll all have access to the breakdown. If you ever feel something's off, you call this number. He handed Elsie a card with his direct line. This isn't a show. I'm not here for press. I came because I forgot what it felt like to be on the floor. That won't happen again. He paused. I'll be back next week. Not as a visitor, Just a guy grabbing coffee, you won't know when, and I don't want to hear about numbers. I want to see faces that aren't afraid to speak. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. He walked to the back, came out with a folder from the office and placed it on the counter. It held unused employee feedback forms, most of them blank, some with half-finished scribbles. He tapped it once. This doesn't go in a drawer anymore. It goes on the wall. And every week, someone reads them out loud in the team meeting, starting Friday. He left without waiting for applause. Outside, the wind had picked up. The sky was still gray, but he felt clearer than he had in years. Inside, the staff slowly returned to motion. Mason returned to the line. Jordan picked up the broom again. Someone started fresh coffee. Elsie stood behind the counter, holding the card with Viktor's number, staring at the name printed at the top. She slipped it into her apron, then walked over to the register where the schedule still sat. She tore it in half. Not in anger, just quiet finality. She picked up a blank form, grabbed a pen, and started fresh. No one said it aloud, but something had shifted. Not everything would be fixed in a week. The fryer still sputtered, the walk-in still needed a new door seal, and the bus schedule wasn't going to change for her. But for the first time in months, no one was waiting to yell her name from across the room, and for now, that was enough to keep going. The following Friday, Viktor returned to store 6, but not to inspect or oversee. He arrived just past 9, dressed in a plain gray jacket, no tie, no assistants trailing him. He waited in line behind a pair of construction workers ordering breakfast sandwiches and took a seat at a corner booth with a cup of black coffee, no clipboard. No clipboard-wielding district manager either. Just him. He watched the morning flow quietly, not with scrutiny, but with presence. The staff moved with purpose. Not rushed, not relaxed, focused. There were still signs of strain. The fryer was still sluggish, the back cooler door still needed a push with the hip to seal shut. But the eyes of the people working were different. They weren't looking over their shoulders anymore. Elsie came by his booth between tables, her apron dusted with flour from the biscuit trays. "I figured you'd come before noon," she said, balancing a tray against her hip. "I figured you'd already be running the place by now," he replied. "I'm still learning where we keep half the paperwork," she said, "but I know where the good pens are." She set the tray down at the counter, then glanced back at him. "We held the first team check-in this morning. Mason brought bagels." "That's new. You keep the feedback binder on the wall." "We do." "Someone wrote that the mop bucket wheels squeak less than Greg's voice," she said. "I filed that one under morale booster." Viktor chuckled once. "You settling into the role. I'm figuring out when to step in and when to step back. It's not automatic yet, but it's not terrifying either." He nodded once. "You've got a calm presence. That matters more than volume." She looked at him a beat longer, then leaned slightly closer. "Did you know Greg used to change the thermostat from his phone?" "I didn't. It's locked now. We set it based on who's standing over the grill, not who's sitting in the office." She moved off to greet a new table, and Viktor sat back, watching the room fill. The difference wasn't in decor or layout, it was in rhythm. People filled the coffee pots without being asked. A new girl he didn't recognize her was shadowing Jordan, learning the table codes. Shift coverage was still tight, but there was now effort being made to distribute it more evenly. When the breakfast rush cleared, Elsie joined him briefly again, a half-empty water cup in her hand. "We're still short one line cook. I've been doing doubles with Mason on prep shifts. That's sustainable, not long-term, but I've got 2 interviews lined up, one's tomorrow. The other's a walk-in from a kid who worked at a deli. I told him we care more about how he treats people than how fast he chops onions." "What did he say?" He said he's never heard that from a restaurant manager before. Viktor took a sip of his coffee. "You're reframing the foundation. That takes longer than just changing the locks." She looked down into her cup. "I didn't think I'd still be here at this point. I was planning to quit before Christmas." "What changed your mind? You sat in that booth and let me talk without pretending you already knew everything." She stood when she heard the front bell ring and turned toward the entrance. An older woman with a cane stepped inside, looking around uncertainly. Elsie walked straight to her. Viktor watched from his seat as she helped the woman to a table near the windows, bringing her a small cushion for her back and making a note to adjust the music volume slightly down. The interaction was brief, but it carried weight. Not because it was dramatic, but because it had never happened before. He stayed until just before the lunch shift began. He waved off offers for a refill and left a 20 under his cup. Just before walking out, he paused at the counter. Jordan was wiping menus near the register. "You're getting faster with the trays," Viktor said. "I've been practicing the two-hand carry," Jordan replied. "Less glass on the floor that way." "You feel like things are moving in the right direction," Jordan looked around before answering. "I don't flinch when I hear my name anymore." Viktor gave a quiet nod and left through the same front door he came in through. Back at corporate the following Monday, Viktor called a meeting with all 10 of his store managers. No presentation slides, no printed agenda. Just him, seated at the table with them, he spoke plainly. "We've gotten very good at measuring numbers, sales, labor, turnover, but we've gotten lazy at measuring trust." He let that sit. "I went undercover at store 6. I saw things I should have caught earlier. That's on me." What we allow becomes what we are. Several managers shifted in their seats. "I'm not here to shame anyone, but from now on, culture audits will be taken as seriously as financial ones. We'll rotate senior staff through locations not to check up but to listen." A hand went up at the far end. It was one of the longest-serving managers. "What exactly are we listening for? Honesty, post-shift exhaustion that feels normal, burnout disguised as high performance, people like Elsie who have been carrying more than they should in silence." Silence followed. Store 6 is under repair. Not perfect, but it's healing. Because leadership there started listening with the intent to serve. He looked around the room. "I want that everywhere." The changes weren't flashy. There were no press releases or viral videos. His team didn't leak the story to the business blogs or use it as a PR stunt. But inside the stores, things changed. Store 6 got their second fryer fixed by the end of the month. The new line cook was hired after the second interview. He wasn't the fastest, but he cleaned his station without being asked and remembered birthdays. Elsie never took the title general manager. She declined it when Viktor offered, saying she wanted to stay closer to the floor. Instead, she trained a new GM while keeping her schedule as lead. She said she could breathe better that way. Viktor kept his promise about returning quietly, sometimes for a coffee, sometimes for lunch. He never stayed more than 45 minutes, never asked for discounts, always sat in different booths. And every time, the staff recognized him but never treated him like royalty. Just a man who'd sat down once and listened. At the end of that quarter, Store 6 didn't lead in sales. It didn't win any awards, but it retained every single team member from that month forward, a first in 4 years. When asked about it in a quarterly meeting, Viktor said only one thing: "If your employees don't feel safe, your business isn't secure. Start there." And for once, nobody disagreed.